Hey there everyone. Since I've been doing a lot of this recently, I thought it would be cool to do a video on it. So here it is, my creative process for building a VR game asset from scratch. The first thing I do is grab my concept art. In this case, it's a sketch by my friend of a super cool break-action laser revolver. If you're making your own concept art for modeling, make sure you do a nice, precise blueprint-style drawing from at least one angle. The more the better. Next, I load it into Blender and get it aligned with my scene. The next thing I do is start blocking out the silhouette. I'm using a modeling style called box modeling for this gun, which means everything is basically made out of squares and cubes. Once I've got some basic shapes in, I'll extrude it sideways to get some depth. I add the hammer cylinder here because I know the body of the gun has to be a bit wider than that, so it's a good reference. Then I go through the rest of the gun in the same way. Sometimes I stray relatively far from the concept sketch. You never know what will end up not working once you try it in 3D. This is a good reason to draw your gun from multiple angles in 2D so you have a more solid design from the outset. But I also like just going with the flow. You can see I saved the handle almost for last. The handle is a more complex shape than the rest of the gun, and it's more annoying to model by hand. Now I'm going to head through and add some more details and tweaks. Real-world references are always good. Speaking of going with the flow, at this point I remembered that I hadn't done the cartridge yet at all. Whoops. And now I can admire my hard work. A common technique to add detail to game assets is to make a low poly model and a high poly model, and use the details of the high poly model to make texturing easier. To quickly make a high poly model, I add a subdivision surface modifier to a copy of all my low poly parts, and go through sharpening edges that are improperly smoothed. Major details like seams can also be added as part of this step. Occasionally, I have to do a bit more work to ensure the high poly mesh looks nice. Next I go through and add higher frequency detail like small extrusions, screws, etc. This gun doesn't have very many of those, as it is a bit more stylized and geometric. The last step is to clean up any problems that have popped up in the high poly mesh. I switch back and forth to make sure everything matches how it should. A crucial part of making a game asset, UV unwrapping is the process of flattening out a model to describe how the textures will be mapped onto it. First, I add seams at edges where I want to slice the mesh up. Next, I lay all the pieces out. I need to maximize use of space without letting anything overlap. It's a bit like solving a jigsaw puzzle, except nobody tells you when you've done it right. I double check the texture is spread around the model evenly, or however I want it to be. I give more pixels to areas that I know will have more detail or be more visible, like the handle. I also assign basic colors to different parts of the high poly mesh to prepare for texturing. This will make it easier to paint different parts of the model separately without having to mask them out by hand. Texturing is probably my favorite part of the process. To start, I bake the high poly details onto the low poly mesh in the form of normal, ambient occlusion, and curvature maps. After checking these over for baking artifacts and fixing these, I'm ready to begin. For each of the surface materials on the gun, I work with Substance Painter's Smart Materials to find a look and feel that I like. Then I tweak the colors and masks to fit in with the rest of the piece. Having fun here is important, just making sure you don't go too crazy and turn it into something that looks like a garish CSGO skin. Once everything's working together, I focus on color more, using a knowledge of color and design theory to make something easy on the eyes. I went for a contrasting color scheme on this gun with bright orange highlights and a cool blue and gray base. To spice things up, I threw some stamps on, playing with designs and icons. I decided to keep things simple with some stripes and the FROSTBITE Armaments logo. As a final touch, I went and tweaked some materials to balance the gun a tiny bit more. I decided it needed slightly more detail at the front, so I added some cutout blocks to the high poly model at the last second. And there it is, the FROSTBITE laser revolver. I uploaded it to Sketchfab to show it off to the world, and now I'm editing this very long video, which you probably stopped watching long ago. If not, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something, or at least were entertained.